All right. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining me today on the training on reasonable accommodations. My name is Kyla Middle. I am the Executive Assistant and Special Projects Coordinator here with SERVE. Next slide, please. So today we're going to be talking about what a reasonable accommodation is, how to develop a reasonable accommodation request process for your organization, different types of accommodations, and lastly, undue hardship. So first, what is a reasonable accommodation? So by definition, it is a request to alter a workplace policy to accommodate a medical condition or a disability. So something important to note is it must be tied to a disability or medical condition in order to be considered a reasonable accommodation request. The overall goal of this is to remove workplace barriers to help members effectively perform their service duties and provide an equal service experience across all members. Something that it is not is a change to the fundamental nature of the program or a way to get out of certain service duties. Although this can seem daunting, most accommodations are inexpensive and easy to implement. Something to note also is that accommodations can apply to members in any stage of the recruitment process. So this means an applicant could also request an accommodation, and if they do, this cannot be a determining factor for offering them a position to serve. So let's go over some additional definitions here as well. I have already used the term disability quite a few times and want to make sure that definition is clear. So disability is defined by the ADA as a mental or physical impairment that substantially limits major life activities. And major life activities include eating, walking, standing, breathing, sleeping, that sort of thing. And another word that needs to be defined is reasonable. So unfortunately, this is much more subjective and kind of a gray area. So per the EEOC, the definition is actually defined by you as a grantee depending on the available resources. So this does not necessarily mean that the accommodation is not costly, difficult, or time-consuming to implement if the available resources are there. And remember, a member or applicant is qualified if they can successfully perform the service duties with or without accommodation. There are 6 steps to developing a reasonable accommodation request process that I will go through. So step 1 is to recognize the request. A member does not have to use the words reasonable accommodation or even put the request in writing in order for it to be valid. Due to HIPAA laws, members should be the ones to initiate this conversation, but it's your responsibility as the grantee to recognize the request. Members can request this at any time, not just upon being offered the position or when they start service. They can also request multiple accommodations if necessary. So here are a few examples of statements that would merit a reasonable accommodation request. The first one is, I'm having trouble getting to my service site on time due to medical treatments I'm undergoing. Or I need time off to get treatment for a back problem. So in both of these statements, it is clearly tied to a medical condition. Therefore, it is a valid, reasonable accommodation request. So step 2 is to gather information. Once a member requests accommodation, you as the grantee must determine what additional information or documentation is needed. This is meant to be a collaborative conversation between the member and you as the grantee. So you can request documentation for a disability and needed accommodations if it's not immediately obvious. And please remember that lack of timely response to a request is considered a denial. So it must be acted upon within a reasonable amount of time. Here are a few examples about requesting documentation. So first, a member in a wheelchair requests a larger desk since the current one does not fit with the dimensions of the wheelchair. So in this case, it is immediately obvious what the disability is. You see the dimensions of the wheelchair, you see that it cannot fit in the desk. Therefore, the grantee may not request additional documentation as it is immediately obvious. In the second example, a member says he's having trouble reaching tools due to a shoulder injury. So in this case, the scope of the injury is unknown. It's unknown what the extent of the workplace barriers are. And so the grantee may request documentation on the nature of the injury and what workplace barriers might present itself. This would also be needed in order to determine what an appropriate accommodation may be. So after the request from the member and the receipt of the appropriate documentation, the next steps are to explore and choose accommodations. It's likely that the member already has some ideas on what accommodation would work best for them, so this could be a very quick conversation. However, in the event that either you as the grantee or the member is struggling to come up with ideas that work for both parties, some other options would be to request ideas from knowledgeable professionals. So this is any professional with an intimate understanding of what the condition is, or consult the JAN website, which is the Job Accommodation Network. Also, accommodations can change over time. So as a best practice, it's good to list as many options up front as you can, because you may need to reference this list later. In terms of choosing accommodations, you as the grantee can ultimately choose which accommodation to implement, but the member's preferences should be considered during that process. So after choosing an accommodation, the next steps are to implement and monitor it. You as the grantee should be regularly checking in with the member to make sure that the implemented accommodation is actually effective and provides the member with an equal experience as other similarly situated members. If the accommodation is deemed ineffective, it's the responsibility of you to exhaust all other options before terminating the member or taking any further action. I want to share a quick example regarding the efficacy of an accommodation. A member with a vision disability requests that the grantee provide someone to read documents to her that she needs to review daily. The grantee thinks this is too expensive and instead provides the member with a device that magnifies print so she can read herself. The member can read with this device, but with great difficulty and significantly slower than other members in a similar position. Therefore, the magnifying device is not an effective accommodation, since it does not provide this member with the same experience as other members. So now I'm going to move on to types of accommodations. There are 5 main categories. The first is service restructuring. So this entails altering when or how a service duty is performed, which could also include reallocating marginal service duties to another member that a disability prevents. Number 2 is a modified schedule, which is a change in either hourly or weekly schedule to accommodate treatments or other side effects of a disability. Number 3 is a modified workplace policy. A good example of this would be allowing an insulin-dependent member to eat or drink at a workstation when that otherwise would not be allowed. Please remember, again, this is not a fundamental change to the program, only a change to a single workplace policy for the requesting member. Number 4 and 5 I put up here because they are classified as reasonable accommodation types by the federal government, but there is not much information about how this translates directly into AmeriCorps service. So if you find yourself considering these options for a member, I would advise you to consult either your Serve Colorado program officer, your regional CNCS portfolio manager, or a legal advisor. Next slide, please. So everything that I've talked about up until this point regarding choosing and implementing an accommodation technically should have had the phrase absent undue hardship attached to it. So you as the grantee do not have to implement or accept a reasonable accommodation request if undue hardship is proven to be present. By definition, undue hardship is causing significant difficulty or expense that would alter the nature of the program. Generally, this is a very high legal standard for you to meet, and sufficient documentation must be provided on why undue hardship is present. And remember, high difficulty, cost, or time consumption alone are not grounds for claiming undue hardship. Before a grantee can claim this, the following considerations must be made. All accommodation options must be considered, as well as all funding sources, which could include asking the member to help cover the cost as a last resort. Again, this is also a function of the available resources to that particular grantee, so it will be a case-by-case determination. What is reasonable for one grantee may not be reasonable for another. Another thing to quickly note is that here at Serve Colorado, we have set aside a small fund to help cover the costs of accommodation if needed. So you're welcome to apply to that at any time if you need. The legal obligation to prove undue hardship falls solely on you as the grantee. The member must only show that an accommodation is reasonable at face value. If there are any effective accommodation options that would not cause undue hardship, you as the grantee are obligated to provide that option. So here are a few examples, since it is kind of a gray area. So example 1, a member requests an adjustment in his work schedule to start at 8 a.m. instead of 7 a.m. due to a disability. This member works with 3 others who cannot do their service duties without the requesting member present. So this would cause the grantee to either also change the work schedules of other members, have the members do nothing between 7 to 8 a.m., or find other work between 7 to 8 a.m. All of these options significantly disrupt the workflow, and so undue hardship can be claimed in this case, and the grantee can deny the request. However, other accommodation options, again, must be explored for this member. In the second example, a member with cancer is undergoing chemotherapy and as a result is fatigued with her current workload. The grantee transfers 3 of her marginal duties to another member. So although the member might be slightly unhappy about receiving additional marginal duties, it's determined that this would not be unreasonable for either member to accommodate and to perform these duties. And so therefore undue hardship cannot be claimed in this case. Here are some additional resources that are linked to this presentation, which can be sent out for your reference. The first I mentioned earlier, which is the Job Accommodation Network website. It's very comprehensive and they're very responsive if you have specific questions to your organization. The second is a guidance document that I found directly from CNCS that might be helpful as it's more directly related to AmeriCorps service. And then the last one was from the EEOC. And this is a very comprehensive document that provides a lot of specific examples related to employment and goes into detail a lot of the things that were discussed during this training. So again, those resources are linked here and we're happy to send out this presentation so you can access them if you'd like. So thank you so much for joining me today. Please feel free to reach out if you have any additional questions. Thank you.